Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. I'm so excited. We have such a wonderful show for you this evening. Allan Schrader, founder, president, and CEO of Lightspeed Aviation, is here with us tonight. And I have to tell you, anytime that we combine both a unique story about a very inspirational individual with getting to talk about product and getting some behind the scenes technology, that just puts it all together for someone who likes to kind of geek out like me on what's new and great about general aviation. Before we get started, a couple quick things just about what's going on as we start to go into the fall season, especially for those of us in the northern parts of the country, and the leaves are about to change and temperatures are changing. We are seeing the last of the big fly-ins happen up here, and there are so many things happening. So I just want to encourage everyone to go and open up socialflight.com or the free SocialFlight mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. There are tens of thousands of aviation events and destinations happening. You can find any place that's got a $100 hamburger, a restaurant, anywhere you can walk to from an airport just by the click of one button. And we have the Fly to Win challenge happening, which means if you have the mobile app, all you have to do is fly in any airport you land at. As long as you've launched that challenge within the app, it'll give you points for landing. And the best part is you only need to get points once in order to be entered into win our grand prize. If you do happen to make it to the top 30 on our leaderboard, you get extra entries, which increases your chances of winning. And that prize, well, very appropriately, it's a Lightspeed Zulu 3 headset that we're currently giving away. So get out there and check it out. You're going to absolutely love it and enjoy some more flying. Now, a little bit more news, of course. We have launched our SocialFlight Live podcast, which means all of our shows, that is approaching 150 shows in the past. We are rolling out through a podcast, through Apple Podcasts, through Google, through Napster, all the different sources. Wherever you get that, if you're in the car and you want to learn a little bit about general aviation and follow this story, just do a search on SocialFlight on your service, just one word, SocialFlight, and you'll get that podcast. We also have our SocialFlight's FAA learning system, our partnership with the FAA, and you can get wings and AMT and even IA renewal credits. It's all there. It is all free, and we created it for you. Now, with that, I'd like to talk about our guest a little bit. Allan Schrader is the president, founder, and CEO of Lightspeed Aviation. He's been the primary driver of headset design and product innovation for nearly 3 decades, with a focus on design elements that enhance comfort, safety, and the overall user experience. Lightspeed Aviation has become highly respected in the aviation community, largely for its innovative products and its way of doing business. And we're going to talk about that, which really involves community and everything else about the world of being a Lightspeed customer. He's a helicopter pilot, a soccer player, an outdoor enthusiast, and someone deeply involved in family and giving to the world around him. Please help me welcome to SocialFlight Live, Allan Schrader. How are you doing this evening, Allan?
I am well, Jeff, and congrats to you on continuing to expand the kingdom of outreach that you do with SocialFlight. I mean, it started out as just trying to give people places to go fly, to go do something, and it's become a whole community. And you've really shepherded that through the beginning times to something that's massive, and a lot of people use it. So, congrats to you.
Well, it's very, very kind of you to say, and we appreciate Lightspeed's support, of course, in making all of that happen. And I've always felt there's a kindred spirit and community between the way that that everything seems to run at Lightspeed in this family kind of way, and what we've always been trying to accomplish in our mission here at SocialFlight.
Well, great. No, it's I think we each get to some degree script the way our business grows and the DNA and the who we are that flows out to our customers. And again, I think your customers experience you as available and energizing and giving them opportunities to do cool stuff. And that's great. It's a great gift to them.
So use the word DNA, and I want to start there because I have to say, it's a treat every time I get an opportunity to interview someone who is a founder of a company in the general aviation space, because founders have this very unique way of bringing who they are to the business, and it just stays through the whole life of the company. And so I'd like people to know a little bit first about who you are and what your background is and how someone goes from, from zero to, to becoming, deciding I'm going to start a headset company in general aviation.
Well, thanks. And that was a lot of years ago. I think as we've talked, I first was involved in a startup that was involved making intercoms, and then I started learning how to design headsets, because headsets were good things to build your intercom business. And but that all happened really in the late 80s. Let me take a few minutes just to acquaint people with my journey through life before I sort of got into business, because I was born in Ohio, spent most of my years in the greater Cleveland area. My dad, for 3 years, we lived in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. And so I got some international exposure, which was great. We got to travel a little bit, which I love and I still love to do. But eventually returned, graduated high school, suburb of Cleveland, went to Cornell University, got an engineering degree, worked for 3 years actually in the welding industry, learned how to weld, and worked as a salesman in that industry before going back to business school. And so then I came out to Oregon in 1981 after graduating from the Darden School at the University of Virginia. So that's sort of a quick 25, 6-year fast forward through that. Along the way, and once I got out here, one of the great joys and blessings of my life is my wife Judy, who's a lifetime co-journeyer, I call her. We've been married 35 years, and I have 2 kids who thankfully are living independently. So that's a mark of something good. And then, as you mentioned, I try to stay active, although the business is probably as much a mistress as more mistress than it should be in my life. But I still play soccer, which I love, and walk 5 miles a day. And I love to travel. I've been to all but one state, 49 states. I got to get to North Dakota sometime along the way here. And almost as many countries, just over all the years, from a business standpoint and personal pleasure standpoint. So it's a good thing I enjoy traveling, because in this business and being the leader of the business, you got to travel a fair amount. So yeah, that's sort of my story, getting me out to Portland, Oregon. And the last sort of really central thing, which you'll see sort of bubbling up at various times, is that in 1980 I gave my life to Jesus, and because of that, it's been this ongoing challenge and joy of trying to figure out how to walk out the purposes He's given me. And so that shows up in various parts of my sort of adult DNA, which we are starting out talking about.
Absolutely. So tell me how aviation became a focus in that. How did that step into the equation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the truth is that I didn't start out with any aviation passion, or really, frankly, any aviation knowledge. When I came out to Oregon in '81, I started working for a large electronics company called Tektronix, and was really involved in operational things, and spent 2 years embedded in an engineering team, which I think probably got my engineering curiosity and juices going. Although my VP of engineering, I remind him that I'm just a dangerous engineer who has ideas that should be able to get done, but of course, they never get done as fast or as simply as I think they should. But I had a really good mentor in my job at Tektronix. That guy left in 1988, left Tektronix, and helped a guy move an intercom business out of his house. It was just a one-man proprietor. And so off he went to do that. And within a few months, he called me back up and said, hey, the operational side of this thing is really a mess. And so how about you and I take a trip to Asia for a week, and let's see what's going on. And we returned with the conclusion that it is and will be a mess unless we do something very different. And so he said, hey, why don't you join me? You join me in this company. And so that company is a name people would generally recognize, Flightcom Corporation. And Flightcom, it used to be Oregon Avionics, yeah, before we changed the name to Flightcom. And so for the next 5 years, I was involved with them, learning about the pilot market, right? We made avionics. We started designing headsets, first a Clark clone one, and then I got a chance to design a couple other headsets. And that was kind of fun. And that's all trying to figure out what habits,
right? Was it Flightcom was a lot of intercom type stuff? I seem to recall that name around that.
Yes. Yeah, and so Flightcom was an intercom company that, if you're an intercom company and you think there's an opportunity to expand your business, you ought to think about making headsets, because headsets plug into intercoms, right? So you can leverage your brand. You already know a lot about how that's going to work. And so I dabbled in making a couple different headsets beyond just the Clark clone ones that everybody started to make at that time. There was no active noise reduction at that time, although it got introduced a couple of years before I left that company. And I left because my mentor that I had mentioned, he had left that company. And so he had started up another company and kept pestering me to help him with parts of that, the sourcing and operations. And so ultimately, at the end of 1993, I went over and joined him at a company called Lightspeed Technologies. And yes, that's a part of where we got the Lightspeed name in our business. But again, we were at that point making sound reinforcement equipment. We were making primarily microphones for singing and speaking, so auditory things. First for the regular things you'd think of, lapel mics and that kind of stuff. But then we evolved into an area that had a lot more passion to it around reinforcing teachers' voices in classrooms so kids could hear. And so that whole classroom reinforcement and amplification business became ultimately what Lightspeed Technologies did. But in year 2 of being there, go ahead, you had a question?
No, that's absolutely fascinating to me. I mean, I didn't realize that the Lightspeed Technologies side was so educationally focused.
Yeah, it's not surprisingly, if you could raise the level of the teacher's voice above the rest of the level of the sound, kids could hear better. And if kids could hear better, you'd be not shocked to know that they could learn better. And so that was a movement that quietly started in the 80s and into the 90s. And so we as Lightspeed Technologies were among the leaders in sort of pushing that thing forward. And it's cool business, and very much a heart kind of business, because you're helping kids, and that's good. But the second year I was there, a guy that I had met who was a supplier of mine to the first business, he came to me and said, "Hey, you know how to make headsets because you've designed them before. I've got a factory I'd like to start to fill up, and I know a guy who can do this new technology called active noise reduction." And there were not very many people who knew how to do that well at the time. And Ed had found Mike. He said, the three of us ought to get together and we ought to design a whole new A&R headset and go into the market. And I said, well, that's a good idea. I mean, I said, I'll help you design the headset, but the fact is, to build a brand will take a really long time. So I'll help you design the headset, and then you can you can have the headset and go to companies that are in aviation that don't have A&R headsets yet, right? And sell them on the concept of that. And I was shocked as heck, because I'd only met Ed 5 times in my life. But he said, no, I want to do this with you, Allan. And so I don't care. It'll just take longer for us to build a business, and let's do it together. And I said, okay, I mean, I'm in. So over the next 2 years, we sort of did the design of what became the 20K, a light silver colored headset. Probably a few people in the audience actually had them. You and I talked about the fact that you jumped in the XL series, which was the next one to follow. But so there I was in 1996 in Oshkosh in a 10-foot booth in the South Hangar, which, by the way, that was the first year that the big hangars opened up. So being in the South Hangar was no longer cool. Everybody would move to the big hangar, except for there was room in the South Hangar. But 10-foot booth, and I had a product, an A&R product, and I started showing it to people and just doing what you do when you're trying to get in front of customers. And that really started what I call the Lightspeed Who years, because people would walk up and they'd look and they'd look at the headset and they'd try it on and they'd say, yeah, it's good, but who are you?
It sounds like that might have also been the kickoff of the time when you would walk through booths at AirVenture and hear that low rumble all of a sudden of like engine noise going because people are demonstrating headset ANR. That was probably, that must be like a turning point in all the hangars.
Well, it could have been. It could have been because we were, you know, those who have been knowing Lightspeed for a long time, we used to take this egg-shaped thing to our booth, and it would create really valid, very comparable engine noise.
I remember
people
that.
didn't know about active noise. People didn't know, so active noise pass. Well, what is that? Why is there a difference? And so you'd sit them in that booth for a couple, 3 minutes, and push the button on and off, and then they go, "Whoa, that's a big difference."
I remember that.
Yeah, we were in the educational mode for a long time, but it's a lot of fun. And so anyway, we were Lightspeed Who for quite a time, but slowly we began to find people that believed enough in us. And I want to thank any of those who are listening, who were early adopters of Lightspeed, because I was always so grateful for the fact that you'd sort of look at this and this big bulky headset that was fat with 1.5 inch air seals, but you tried it on, it worked pretty well, really well actually, and you sort of went, well, for $400, maybe it's worth a flyer.
It absolutely was, as I remember being in those days. And I will say, you and your headsets are memorialized on my walls from way back then, and I have pictures of my kids in those headsets as well. And so help me understand. When I know you got exposed to the business end of this during that time, were you also then becoming more and more exposed or involved? At what point did you become a pilot or take it on from a user perspective to see the need and the use of what headsets mean to pilots?
Yeah, well, it actually took me until 2016 to become a pilot, and even that, become a helicopter pilot, not a fixed wing pilot. But I'm sure by then I had hundreds of right seat hours, because I was doing lots of flying with the test headsets as we made models that had to go flying, and then lots of flying because as I made my friends, they were pilots, so sometimes I got to go flying with them. So that really is, but I think the intensity of testing and retesting products was a driver in just learning more about what pilots needed. And then, at the trade shows, you would rarely see me in our booth, because I would spend my time in the dealer booths, because I found that people who came to our booth mostly knew about us and mostly liked us, and they wouldn't really tell us everything that we need to hear about how we compared to the competition. Whereas if I stood in the dealer booths working, people would come up and we'd compare the different headsets. We had brand B and brand D and others, and I started hearing a lot of stuff about what they wish they could have, what they liked about our product and didn't like about our product. And so that kind of stuff always fuels ideas and opportunities for innovation, which is probably why we've been able to do that at 2 or 3 times the speed that many of our competitors have done.
Well, I remember, early on, those headsets were a very significant departure from what was on the market. I mean, when we think about everything back then, it was so classic, just metal headband, metal, two other metal pieces that come up. Like you said, they were some clone of a David Clark one way or another. The very thin ear seals that wrapped around there and had a little foam in them. You had a very dramatic departure from that in something that on one hand looked big, right? I mean, no question about it, but had these huge ear cushions and everything else. You put it on and you were like, oh, wow, this is what it feels like when there's a pillow, right? Like, it was a whole different approach and also different materials. Tell me a little bit about what went into that. How did you evolve there?
Yeah, and so yes, everybody, at least that was piloting back then, was familiar with the Clark or Clark clone products. Designs were all the same. And I had a chance to experiment with a more comfortable design back when I was at FlightCom, trying to figure out ways to change the ear seal and the side pressure characteristics. Active noise, on the other hand, required you to have a very good seal. So out of that grew this idea of a huge pillow-like multiple layers of different densities of confer foam. And we were the first people to use conformal foam for a headset because I wanted to increase the comfort, but I also had to make sure it had enough clamping so that it stayed sealed so that the A&R worked properly. So that was one of the real challenges. And then I hadn't learned enough about the ergonomics of heads to really do the science about what that would take. And so you notice that the ear seals kept getting smaller over the years as we got smarter. But the early ones were big. And yes, it was an all plastic headset design. And that, that was something we learned on, and I'll say honestly and a little bit sadly, we learned on the backs of our customers, right? Because we designed this thing, it was kind of the best we knew how to make. But when you get 20, 30,000 of them out in the field, you start learning a lot about how people use them and the materials and design strengths and weaknesses and some of those things. And so, that's really one of the things that started the culture of service that we have at Lightspeed. I remember in those early, the 10-foot booth in the South Hangar that, I'd tell people, well, we have a 3-year warranty on the product, and several of them would kind of jokingly say, well, that's if you're around for 3 years. But our early headsets had a 3-year warranty, but as we got more of them out there and more people were using them, then we'd start to see failures of things, on the stirrups or on the headband. And so once we found out what wasn't working well, of course, we'd redesign the thing so we'd make it stronger. Well, the truth is that whole family of products, Ks, XLs, and 3Gs, all were largely on the evolving big cup plastic model. We were increasing functionality by adding auto shut off, and then by adding the ability to plug in a cell phone or to listen to music. But as we kept making them and then making the parts better as they were breaking, of course, people would have headsets 3 years, 4 years, 5 years that would break. I mean, the things that by now we knew would break. And so there was no way we were going to charge people for repairing them because we didn't know when we gave it to you, but we learned somewhere along the way that product wasn't as good as it could be. And so I'd say for the first 10 years at least, maybe 12 years, we never charged anybody to fix anything because it just wasn't right given everything we had learned, and again, in some cases learned on them and with them. So,
but I want to say
it's a funny outcome though, Jeff, because I look back in amazement. We built a reputation as being an amazing company for service, and as you probably can guess, part of the way you do that is to create a lot of service events. Right? I mean, we weren't trying to create the service events, of course, but inadvertently we were creating service events, and then we were caring for people in ways that were right and appropriate, and we ended up getting a lot of credit for that. We ended up, yeah, these guys are amazing for their service, and so I'm grateful for the legacy. I'm sad for how we built it, but yeah, we've since then just made that part of our DNA, as we talked about earlier. That you got to treat people in very personal ways. You always get somebody answering a phone. No phone trees here when you call Lightspeed, because I don't like that. I don't think that's personal, and I don't think that's the way we can engage properly with people who either have a service need or even a buying need. So
I have to tell you, as someone who was along for that ride in those early days, who did have some service issues, have issues with requiring service, I'm glad that that's the way that it actually worked out from this, because everyone I remember talking to anyone had any of those things, I don't know a single person who said anything negative that I recall in any of the circles that I was in so many years ago, decades ago, that had anything negative to say. It was always positive, and it's I think it's very unique to have been able to build something where the product did require service, and yet people were so passionate about the way that you did that. I remember, like you said, they'd answer the first call and be like, well, I can send something right out to you, You're not going to pay anything. I'm going to give you instructions on how to do it, or you can call me and I'll tell you how to do it. Or if you're not comfortable doing it, send them in and we'll do it for you. And I was just like, what? Like, it
Well,
changes your whole perspective on all of that, and it creates that culture that now that you have products that probably almost never require service, yet that flavor is still there, which I don't think you have the benefit of any other way. So I just want to say that I think that's pretty impressive.
well, thanks. It was what it was. Impressive, unfortunate. It's grown into that. And one of the things. So eventually I left Lightspeed Technologies, and we had incubated the business for a couple, 3, 4 years in that business, and then we started Lightspeed Aviation. And so that happened in the year 2000. And
Yeah.
that's the first time I was actually like the president. So then I had to be in charge of things like culture and direction. I mean, who do we want to be when we grow up? If and as we grow up, we did. But and so service was one of those. The personal care for people is one of those, and it really has continued to make a difference, even when our products now actually are incredibly reliable.
Yeah.
So
I want to touch on, you brought up your faith and how that applies to the organization, your personal direction of your life. How did that play in, and does that continue to play in to how you treat your customers and how you view new products and things like that? Does that affect your business?
yeah, it does. I mean, so I think it does. We don't have plaques on the wall that have anything to do with faith statements or anything like that. Obviously, you try to live it out in ways that are infectious or at least impactful for other people in the business. But yeah, I think it affects the spirit of our team. In our early sort of business focus, I said, we're here to serve God, and then we're here to serve our customers, and then we're here to serve each other. And so that was kind of the guiding relational principle about that. And it starts by serving each other, and then you can serve the customers well. And maybe somewhere along the way, you also end up serving the purposes that God put you on the earth for. And so I think I've walked that out in general ways. I think I walked that out in some specific ways. An example I'd give you is the Lightspeed Aviation Foundation. That's something we started formally in 2010, but in 2008, what happened is once we launched the Zulu product at the end of 2007, it was really a transformative product for the market. And so we started getting a lot of 33Gs traded in for Zulus, right? People had bought those headsets 2, 3 years before. Now we have a fundamentally better, more comfortable, more quiet, more beautiful product. And we always have a trade-up program to assist those who had invested us in the past to continue to grow with the innovations we offer them. Because it just seems right. If you plunk down $600 for a headset and flew it for 3 or 4 years, and then some really new, better stuff comes out, shouldn't we give you $300 back for it? And so we do that on a regular basis just cause. But in this case, we start getting lots of these back. And so I thought, what if I gave away active noise headsets to missionary pilots? I didn't, they basically never would have those, not at that time in the ANR life cycle. This is, this is 2008. And so I got involved with IAMA and started getting all the organizations to tell me how many pilots they have flying outside of the country in missionary service. And then I arranged to give each of them 2 refurbished 3G headsets. I gave them 2 because first off, I know they often have passengers, but frankly, I also gave them 2 because if one of them broke, there's going to be no way they'd ever get them fixed, right? So I better give them 2. And plus we had them, right? These things were coming in. So over the next 12 months, we gave away almost 1,000 headsets.
Wow.
Because in my world, you give what you got, and certainly what I got, what I had was lots of 3Gs, and so for not a lot, I could turn them into great headsets and send them out to people. So, I wouldn't say that was something I did because of my faith, but it was something that I did because I felt like it was the right thing to do.
Right. So the Zulu itself, I mean, it all happened at the same time, and it's so wonderful to hear how that played into the missionary work that you support and all of that. And this happened around a revolution of your design, which gets us closer to what I want to talk about also tonight. I want to make sure we have time for. But tell me how you made this radical shift, I think, to a whole different design of headset, all different materials, all different things like that, which then lead us in the direction to the thing I'm dying to talk about.
Well, that's great. No, I mean, it's pretty simple. We'd already talked, quite frankly, about the fact that the plastic headset that we made over 100,000 of, just, you could try to reinforce this and do this and do this, but I couldn't make it reliable like I wanted it to be. And so I started back in 2005 saying, all right, so what if we start with a metal headband instead of a plastic one, since the plastic ones break? What do we start with magnesium sliders instead of plastic ones, because those break? What if we start with stirrups that are glass reinforced, and so what if we just change how we do the headband part and headset structure? And then what else could we do that's different and better? Because we had to get away from the big monstrous ear seals, which we had sorted with the 3Gs. So how do we create better A&R? And that, I won't get into that, but that had to do with putting the ear closer to the microphone and speaker, not further away. The fatter the ear seal, sort of the further you get away from those. So to get the highest levels of cancellation, you want the ear to be really close. To make it really close, we made the cups non-reversible. You have a left cup and a right cup because our ears are angled. And so if you're making them angled and you want it really close, you can tuck the earlobe in behind the ear seal instead of having the ear seal go around the ear. And so all of those were things that sort of culminated in a whole different approach to wearability, to comfort, to quiet. And out came Zulu.
Wow. Well, it was certainly a big jump and a whole new materials, and obviously was an enormous success on the market. And so let's get to it. You just announced this guy right here.
Right. Delta Zulu.
The Delta
Change
Zulu.
to Zulu. Right.
Which has a remarkable number of features in it. A very elegant headset. Tell me the history of like what went into it. This seems to me like a headset of themes. This seems to me like a headset where there were some major things that you wanted to accomplish. Clearly, wearables and carbon monoxide, hearing, and the things that you wanted to do about being able to adjust to people, especially in an aging population with inherent hearing challenges in it. Recording of flight data. There's a lot of things that go into this. Were those themes there at the very concept of the headset?
Well, sort of yes and no. I'll give you the honest backstory, which is after we had introduced a whole series of products in the 2010 range, from Sierra to Zulu 2 to PFX to Tango to Zulu 3. When I came out with Zulu 3, I had to, I knew because of our customer feedback, they had been sometimes disappointed with Tango and PFX for various reasons, but it had to be a product that was clearly better than a Zulu 2. So I had some ideas, particularly around the Kevlar cords and changing the ear seals, and so we did that. But then I really was scratching my head, Jeff, saying, wow, this is the best headset we've made, and maybe the best headset being made. I'm not sure how to make a better headset, right? And at the business level, that can be a little scary because we know the pilot market is not growing. So if we want to grow our business, we really have to be able to move people from the headset they have to a better headset, right? But to do that, there's got to be like really a better headset. And we just started making with Zulu 3 a really, really good headset, really quiet, incredibly comfortable, all the features you would want. So, what can we do to to have somebody who's got a Zulu 3 or even, Bose 820, to cause them to go, wow, this new headset gives me so much more. I need to change. I need to put those in the back seat and buy some other ones. So there was a business side to it. There was also just a consciousness side about safety things that were gnawing at me. I actually started playing around with the idea of how could we put an SpO2 sensor in an ear cup. And as you can tell, thus far we haven't succeeded, but it's something we can and should and continue to work on doing, because it's an important safety feature. And carbon monoxide, which in the last 3 years or more has really started to rise up as a newsworthy thing that people talk about. But studied that, found out it was, it's a bad thing, a dangerous poison that can come in and creep in. You don't know it, and it takes out people. Obviously, Dan Bass is a great story of somebody who it didn't take out, but that's the rare one. And so, and then my wife also was a part of this journey, because she had sudden hearing loss in one ear about 8 years ago. And that was, it was kind of a bummer, and she couldn't hear well in that ear, but she could hear fine in the other. And so life kind of went on. But three to 4 years ago, she had a somewhat of a hearing loss in the other ear. And so then she had to go to hearing aids. And wow, it's just such a difficult thing for the person specifically. But obviously, we've got an aging population. We've got some people who already have hearing issues. And so, wow, couldn't we do something about that? And so these ideas just started to accumulate. And then as we looked at, well, how could we do that? What could we do? It meant we had to change our whole platform of electronics. Everything up until now has been really a digital platform, with the exception of PFX, an analog platform. But to do the things with hearing acuity, to do the things to have extra processors that collect data, utilize the data, set alerts, all this stuff, it had to be basically a whole new way of providing the electronics. So that's not like going from a Zulu 2 to a Zulu 3. That's several $1 million worth of work and time, and quite frankly, more than I predicted back when we entered into this. But that's probably always the case. Anyway, so no, it was born out of a desire to do something that was significant, not just, I don't want to make a product that just it's painted purple and then you can merchandise more of them or something. People already have good headsets. They need something that is substantially different and better. And if I can't do that, then I don't want to sell it. But yeah, we began to work on doing some of those pieces and putting those pieces together. And ultimately, you end up with Delta Zulu.
So it sounds like safety it's playing a larger and larger role in what you're doing in many of your product designs. It's clearly a big role here, right? Right. In the Delta Zulu, the carbon monoxide. You sent me a pair to test and check out. I have to tell you, it's fascinating to see what's happening. Even though I had a carbon monoxide detector in the aircraft, to actually see what's happening right at your head level, how it varies, understand what's taking place and what types of flight regimes are causing it. And it even has the effect that now I'm going to hunt down some of the leaks on the ground that are finding that I'm able to detect because of that. So safety seems to be a pretty big focus for you.
Yeah, it has become that. And it's become that for another reason I didn't quite mention, which is we got involved back in 2019 with a project the Air Force has taken on to develop a whole new helmet, a next generation fixed wing helmet. They've been flying the same helmet for 40 years. And so I was asked to participate in looking at how we can make better acoustic systems for it, which I'd love to do. And I was stunned, Jeff, stunned at some of the facts about our pilots today. With the exception of the F-35, no pilots, no crew wear active noise helmets. No active noise in the military.
Even in helicopters.
Even in helicopters. So they're working from 40-year-old helmets, but with still using passive attenuation. I couldn't believe it. Worse than that, though, is that the DoD safety, hearing conservation safety data suggests that easily 20% of people in the higher noise environments maybe more, leave the services with a shifted or complete threshold loss in hearing. And so the people that we asked to protect us, we're not protecting them. And that just brought me to a boil relative to safety and how do we focus on providing products that can protect them better from an attenuation standpoint, but also then can measure how much they're getting dosed by noise. Are they being overdosed in their flights? And what can we do about that? And so yeah, safety has become a real passion of mine, and that started to grow really after we started on Delta Zulu. But yeah, safety is a key theme. In fact, we changed the vision statement for the company to creating products that protect and save lives, because that's just so much more meaningful, I think, than making products that people love. Which there's nothing wrong with making products that people love, but we should focus on something that's bigger than that.
Yeah.
And thus this safety wearable platform. We've designed a platform that isn't a headset anymore. I'm trying to get the market in the world not to call it an A&R headset as much as a safety wearable, and A&R is a part of the features of that product.
I want to pause on that for a moment, because I find extraordinarily impactful that you kind of cracked the door open on what's taking place throughout the military for their hearing loss, and that you're uniquely positioned to be able to do something about that. I knew in advance, of course, with our Titan Mustang, we have the H mod, the Zulu H mod going in the flighthelmets.com headsets and helmets. And as far as I know, you're the only company with Lightspeed that is focused on that market, specifically making a modification, a kit for A&R to protect the hearing of pilots who fly with helmets, many of which are at risk in very loud aircraft, etc. It seems like that's just a natural progression to this almost kind of shameful discovery about what's happening in the military.
Well, yeah, and I think that the real difference is we fly, even the noisy planes, maybe they're between 90 and 95 decibels, sort of A-weighted noise across the total spectrum. And we fly it for, what, an hour, 2 hours? The safety threshold for 8 hours is 85 decibels. So you're 10 decibels, and you probably know that 10 decibels is actually 4 times the sound pressure energy of the other threshold. So sound pressure level is at one level at 85 decibels. It's 4 times that amount at 95 decibels. But the military guys are flying for 6, 8, 10 hours and flying in aircraft that are 5 to 10 decibels higher than the 95 decibels that I just mentioned. So they're at 8 times the sound energy. Excuse me. So it's radically punishing noise environment that they're in for very long times. So it's a very difficult task, but we got to do something to help them out. I'm going to do something to help them out. Put it that way.
Well, I'm impressed and thankful that Lightspeed's doing something to try to help that problem. Let's go back to the Delta Zulu and how you've taken that same type of technology approach, because one of the other areas about this is it seems to be a headset that essentially, I'm going to use the phrase, meets you where you are. We don't expect you to have perfect hearing. We know that there's going to be, it's not just preferences. There's going to be some, where are you today in the health of your hearing? And the headset starts with an analysis, with a test, with a hearing test that then adapts in order to adjust what you hear. That seems to be much more than marketing. That seems to be something that also is about health and caring for the community and the pilot community.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's really cool the way we were able to weave that into the digital system. Many people I'm sure are familiar with the fact that if you're on Pandora, there's lots of places where you can download an app to your phone that you can run music through where you can set your own treble and bass settings. So a settable audio profile is not by itself particularly unique, although it is helpful in hearing things better. And most people use that for music, and they enhance the treble, and you hear more cymbals and flutes and good things like that. But speech intelligibility is a key part of what we do, what we need to do, and need to do well. And so having a way to improve the user's intelligibility in really obvious ways, particularly if you have a reasonable amount of deficiency, and in very specific ways around your deficiency. So you're not just turning the volume up, you're turning up the volume of certain frequencies to match the proper levels of the other frequencies that maybe you hear pretty well at. So it is very much a safety-focused thing that has and will keep helping people hear better. And if you can hear better, you can fly longer, you can be more relaxed, you can enjoy yourself, and fundamentally you'll be safer.
Is it I imagine it, and correct me if I'm wrong, to be a kind of multi-layered approach. Like at one level, you take the hearing test through the Delta Zulu and correct deficiencies as to where you are in your personal hearing. And then on top of that, then you apply what Lightspeed does to focus on boosting certain frequencies for being able to hear radios and trying to get rid of other frequencies for engine noise. Is that how it works, or is there something different involved?
Well, I think you're correct that the two things contribute to the best result, but they don't specifically work together in that, just to be clear. That active noise as a process improves intelligibility because it reduces low frequency noise, and low frequency noise tends to cause the ears, there's a lot of energy in low frequency noise, so the ears shut down some. They don't hear as well to protect themselves from this energy. And when they do that, they also don't hear the higher frequencies as well, which means you just don't hear the softer consonant sounds well. And when you hit the button and active noise turns on, you get an intelligibility boost, is what I'm saying. The technology by itself does it, and the better your active noise, the better the advantages of that boosting. But the hearing acuity part is really just a re-sculpting of what the sound coming up the radio through your cord, how that gets changed based on your tested deficiencies, so that when it comes to you, it comes in a new form than what it started out through the intercom. And that new form improves your intelligibility for the reasons we've spoken about.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, the other thing, of course, is that it's very app-driven and seems to be, you even say in the app, new features to come, basically, as to what's happening. So there seems to be a little bit of I always hate to use terms like future-proof, but there's a little bit of, looking forward, let's say, or more to come involved with someone who gets on board with the Delta Zulu. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. So I think I mentioned earlier, it took us a couple of years to redo and re-architect and repopulate and get parts for and everything else, this whole new digital platform. So the platform's designed to be scalable. It's got an audio processor that processes all the audio, both the A&R audio and, in this case, the hearing acuity audio. And then it has another sensor data processor that has the capability to process sensor data. And so right now, the only sensor data it gets is the CO data. And that processor is architected in such a way that not only it processes it, it can figure out what it has, and then it can utilize that against a table of alerts that are set to tell you when you want to be told about the various things the sensor is delivered. And so, you can see how that could be scaled to other safety sensor features. And I mentioned at the very beginning, talking a little bit about SPO2. That would be a logical one. It turns out to be a difficult one for a lot of reasons of people's own ergonomics in their head and the blood flow through their arteries. And there's a lot of things that end up making it more challenging than I thought it was 3 years ago. I would tell you that originally we planned to launch the product with that as one of the features also, but that became too hard.
And
So,
SpO2 being blood oxygen saturation. So for
correct.
people who are wondering what that
And
really
with
is.
that, you sort of get biometrics for free, but the one that pilots would most care about, obviously, is their blood oxygen saturation.
Right.
So, but you can see how a canary alert system, much like the CO one, could be mimicked and used for cautionary and critical SpO2 alerts. And you can set those at whatever levels you're comfortable with, because everybody's personal physiology changes where your saturation levels might start to affect you. And so that's an obvious one that's down the road, because there's still a lot more pavement to put down before we can drive that road. But there are other ways that a connectable headset can help the pilot be more connected into his cockpit. Some of those may eventually emerge from the avionics guys who have a way to deliver information to you, or information they may want to have about you. You could think about spatial 3D audio positioning. If you had sensors that could tell you, you set them when you're looking north, and as you move your head around, you're creating data that says you're looking over at 10 o'clock. And so if there's some warning of an aircraft at 2 o'clock, it gives it to you at 4 o'clock, right? Because you're looking at 10. And so you get that information in a way that's more usable to you. Now that's something already being done in the military space. That's not any cool breakthrough thing. And I'm not sure how often we're getting planes so close to us that we want to worry about when they're coming to us. We got ADS-B now. So, but I'm just using those as examples of ways that we have this preferred head-worn position that we uniquely get to hold and have. And so what are things that we can gather from that can be injected into the flying scenario that allows pilots to be safer in what they do? So
what went into the recording feature, the idea of being able to have the audio from your flight?
Yeah, well, you're probably aware that we had an app called Flight Link that was a wired app for our old generation products. And it's been well used, and it's a really good training tool, but it's also not a bad playback tool for folks in high density traffic areas. And so it just made sense to incorporate that into the app. We didn't need another app for that. And it allows for the versatility of recording things if it's for training, if it's for your flying, or you can hook it up and record, some of your GoPro stuff. You can link in your audio directly through, through that. So it's it's just another nice feature that was easy to bundle in an app.
Wow, that's great. And there is one other thing that's fairly unique about what you decided to do this time, this being the control unit on it. Both your cables coming out the same side. And of course, while I have this here, I'll point out that it's got a removable power block that can either be lithium-ion charging or backup with regular batteries that goes into it. But what went into that decision to change the idea of going through a control unit and instead having
so thanks. We do a lot of focus group work. We did a lot of focus group work around Delta Zulu. And you may recall all the way back with PFX, while that box was a monstrous brick, it also had the battery, the 2 cords coming out the top. And that was something people liked in that. And certainly in our focus groups, people felt like that was a lot easier to put the control unit somewhere, because a lot of people put it in a pouch, in a map pouch on the side, or and they want to have it easy to route the wires together. Even I was here a CPPP seminar this last weekend in Spokane. Yeah, they put their control unit in the armrest basically. And one guy pointed out it's a real hassle. I have to tape the cord to my box because there's only one place the cords go in and out, right? And so if it's in line, then the one that goes out the wrong way has to go all the way back around. And then I have to close my thing so it's coming out the right place. And so it's not a reason you'd buy a headset, because the cords come out both ends. But I think it is an improved feature for users buying an improved headset.
Well, I think it's great. It does allow you to tuck it away. So certainly a very cool idea. I want to as we approach the top of the hour, I want to talk a little bit about what you think is kind of coming or what the future is. I admire how you and Lightspeed have always wanted to push the envelope, always push the boundaries. You mentioned other headsets, some of which you continued, some of which you didn't continue on, but they all had technology that perhaps was ahead of its time, or there was some other limiting factor, but I think they were all fantastic ideas that we want to see. Do you see some of that coming back around? Do you see a future, for example, Tango with being wireless? What do you see coming when the technology catches up to Allan's desires and wishes?
Right. Yeah, well, I think Tango and PFX are the two sort of outliers in what would otherwise have been a pretty successful run of products over 20 some years. PFX, we've replaced it and totally jumped in front of it with what we're doing with Delta Zulu. So we did learn things from that, and I think we made it right and more than right with that product. Tango, there's just a fundamental problem with taking a great wired headset and turning it into a wireless headset, right? Because too many to count pilots that I spoke with, basically thought that when they got a Tango, they were going to get something like a wireless Zulu. Right? They knew it looked a little different, but they loved their Zulus, and now they wanted to go wireless. And it sort of can't be done very well, right? It's have a wireless product. First off, the audio quality will be degraded in some ways because it's not running on copper. To have a wireless product, you need to have a battery up in the headset. So that's going to increase the weight. To have a wireless product, you need to have wireless stuff up in the headset instead of the battery box. Think about everything in the battery box. You'd somehow got to put that in and on your headset. And so it makes it bigger and heavier and bulkier.
I want to be clear though, I'm excited about those things. I don't view those things as anything negative. I view those things as those are just ahead of their time. So if you take something like Tango, it just means we haven't gotten to the point yet that it's so light that the batteries, or that the same way you can charge your phone by just putting it down on something now that you can't have powered without a cord, or that the technology for the audio being wireless at the same quality as a wired thing just isn't there yet. But you were pushing in that direction, and it seems like that's got to be one of the things you're going to wind up getting to at some point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a lot more doable. With everything we learned, it's a lot more doable because so much more of the control functionality could be done from an app. And the circuit have shrunk quite a bit. I mean, we probably have twice as much circuitry stuffed into Zulu as Delta Zulu now as we had in Zulu. But it all got smaller, so there's room to stuff it. So those things all help. Those things all help in making a viable product. So,
well, I just want to say, from a user perspective, from out in the marketplace, thank you for pushing those boundaries in all those ways. It matters. It's fascinating, and also to say that at a time right now in the world when there are so many challenges in supply chain, when so many companies talk about having to direct all of their engineering resources internally just to redesigning, respinning boards, redoing things, just so they can keep producing the same products in such a challenging world market. And here you are with something brand new. That's very unique and commendable. It's very impressive.
Well, thanks. There's obviously tons of things that went into all that, and the fact that it took us longer than we thought actually helped us on the supply chain side because we built some time into the order schedule. But no, I'm really proud of what our team has done, and our supplier base has helped us do to keep us in stock with Zulus and Sierras, and still to be able to pull this thing off. And we'll see, because there's been an awful lot of demand just in the first, what has it been, 2 weeks, not even, since we launched the product. So we definitely have a tiger by the tail, and we're trying to hold him down so he doesn't turn around and bite us. So we'll see. But we're working hard at that, and I hope we won't disappoint people.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone out there, be sure to go to lightspeedaviation.com. Take a look there firsthand to be able to see what goes into the new Delta Zulu headset, see the features, see everything going on there, and see how some new technology is hitting the market in the midst of lots of continued bad news about supply chain and everything else. And as I understand it, these and regular Zulu 3 headsets are in stock.
Well, not quite in stock. The threes are, but these are rapidly, it'll take us probably through the Christmas season with dealers on some form of allocation to make sure that we're getting enough of them out there. We plan to build, 3,000 of them, and I don't think that'll be enough to get us through the Christmas season. So hopefully, everybody listening in will prove me right about that.
Place your orders.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's fine.
Well, Allan Schrader, thank you so much for joining us this evening here on SocialFlight Live. I'm an enormous fan of your story as a founder, as a company, and the values and community that you continue to foster within General Aviation.
Yep. Well, glad to do it. Glad to do our part to make the community stronger, better, and glad to have had an hour with you, Jeff. Thanks for this opportunity too.
You're very welcome. Good night, Allan.
Good night. Take care.
And to all of you, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us here for another episode of SocialFlight Live. We will be back next week on Tuesday, September 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, with a very fun and informative episode with Don Durston from NASA's Ames Research Center, talking about the X-59 supersonic aircraft, which promises to truly break some boundaries in commercial air travel and what can happen with supersonic air travel without the sonic boom that prohibits that from happening around the world, especially over populated areas. So fascinating things. Be sure to join us next Tuesday. And then also on Tuesday, October 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Top Gun Maverick stunt pilot and aerial coordinator Kevin LaRosa will be here on the show to talk about the making of that epic show. Until next time, of course, thank you again for joining us here on SocialFlight Live. Be sure to listen to us on your local or your favorite podcast channel. And I wish you all blue skies.